Welcome to Language Learning Insights. I'm Rick Moore, creator of MeVoca, and today I'm joined by Gordon Smith Duran, founder of LightSpeed Spanish. Gordon and his partner Cynthia have helped language learners for many years through a wide range of resources, including their website, YouTube channel, and their school in Spain. Today we'll talk about language learning methods, common learner challenges, and practical advice for students. Gordon, thanks for joining me.
You're more than welcome, Rick. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, great to see you again. Hey, I'd like to start out just by talking about the origins of Lightspeed. I know we spoke once before on the phone, and you mentioned that you didn't actually intend to become a language teacher. It's something that you found over the course of your career. So I'd love to hear how you got started in this.
Okay, so what happened was I used to work for a textile company, and part of my job was to travel. I lived in Morocco for 4 years and worked managing a factory there, and then I was sent over to Mexico. So whilst I was working there, I kind of was dumped in the middle of a village where nobody spoke English, everyone spoke Spanish, and it was like, learn this language, or nobody's going to do what you want them to do. So I was put in a situation where I had to learn Spanish, and as I was learning it, I thought, wow, I like this language. This is really nice. And on the back of me spending 4 years in Morocco where everyone spoke French to me, for whatever reason, French just didn't do it. But then I went to Mexico and I fell in love with the Spanish language. What happened was that my company that I worked for was bought out by another company, and I was eased out of the company. So I was kind of in a place where I didn't have a career, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? And it was my passion for the Spanish language that I thought, I want to do something with this. This is really why I was put on this earth.
That's fascinating. I love how certain languages resonate with certain people. What about Spanish? Is it like hearing it? Is it the way you feel when you speak it?
Well, it depends on where. I could go two directions. Yes, in a practical way, I just love the sound of Spanish. I love the structure of Spanish. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I love the culture that's attached to it. But now, when I look back, the other road is when I look back on my life. It was I had to learn Spanish so that I could have everything that I've got in my life now, including a Spanish wife. So it was kind of like the universe saying to me, learn this language. This is going to serve you well.
I love that. I love that story. When you started out, did you do like a crash course or have any preparation before landing in Mexico, or you kind of like just learning as you went along?
I had, at the time, we're talking about when I was 1998. So the internet was barely kicking off. There was very little there for me to learn. So I had a book, and I just learned from a book. 6 months I spent before I went to Mexico. I had 6 months to learn. So I learned from a very basic book. And I also learned, I don't know if you've seen it, these systems where you can learn a lot of vocab by linking a Spanish word with an English word, and it helps you to remember vocab. So I learned a lot of vocab, very basic Spanish, and that was it. Then I was plunked in Mexico. The bad news was, for me, was I didn't think that I should get a teacher. So I didn't have a teacher. I just learned literally with full immersion. That was my system.
Okay. Yeah, that's really diving in the deep end there to start with. What would you do differently now? You mentioned that resources more limited at the time. If you were going through this today, like what would you do? Let's say if you had just a few months to prepare before landing in Mexico, you didn't know Spanish, where would you start?
Well, given if I was starting again, given the level of interest that I had, because I had this incredible obsession, even before I went to Mexico, there was something I just thought, oh, I've got to learn this language. I would instantly invest in a teacher, at least a teacher for lessons. If I was starting again and I would get the company to pay, I would have 2 lessons a week for sure. And at the same time, I would be doing things like, for example, your kind of app, which, I would be doing something every day for at least 3 or 4 blocks of 10 minutes. That's kind
Mhm.
of the way our mind seems to like small blocks of chunks of learning. So yeah, teacher, apps, books. I think books are great as well. I would have exercise books for when I want to do some exercise and look at grammar. I would be listening. Basically, I would use all the senses. I didn't at the beginning, Rick. I used a book. I couldn't listen. I had some cassettes. We had cassettes, but principally, I thought if I worked through a book, that would sort it. And of course, it doesn't. You need every sense involved in this.
Mm, right. I like your idea of breaking it down into 10-minute chunks, as a lot of us are studying a language just on the side. And I know I have 10 minutes when I'm waiting in line to use an app, maybe more than 10 minutes when I'm preparing a meal or getting ready in the morning to listen to something. So if you just sticking with beginners here, and putting talking with the teacher aside, oh, that's the most important thing. But on your own, if you have 30 or 40 minutes a day, what would you recommend to a beginner? Like how should they spend those 3 or 4 chunks?
Okay, so this is it's quite difficult. What I'm going to suggest is a challenge, and it's a bit scary for beginners because beginners are very focused on, let's give me the words, let me see it, let me see how it's put together. But what I would say is this: we should, as beginners, use what's called the Pareto rule, the 80-20 rule, which is 80% of the time listen and speak, and 20% of the time read and write. And the reason I say that is because in real life, that's what we do. We speak and we listen 80% of the time. And then, yeah, we probably write a bit more. But even though it's very scary, and at the beginning you would say, I don't even know what I'm hearing, that's not important. We've got to tune our ear in and we've got to tune our mouth in. So, for example, speaking, you say, well, how can I speak? Because I don't know any words. You can read out loud and from a good book, and as long as you understand the alphabet and understand the pronunciation, you can read any word in Spanish because it's phonetic. You don't need to
Mhm.
understand the word, you can still pronounce it correctly. So that's kind of the advice that I give to beginners. Don't just focus on reading and writing. It's great because in the real world you're going to have to speak and listen.
Mhm. But I think it's a common mistake that beginners make. I certainly made this when I started learning Spanish, and that was I thought I needed to have a certain knowledge before having a conversation. So I kept, I guess, postponing having a conversation, thinking I needed to learn more vocabulary and more grammar, practice something more before actually talking. What, how soon do you recommend a beginner, like from day one, or like just learn some basics before having that first conversation?
Well, I'm not saying that they should have a conversation immediately because as a beginner, it's going to be very boring, very, hola, ¿qué tal? And that's it.
Uh,
Um, but what I would suggest that they do is this. If you're working on an app, let's say you're in the Mi Voca app, your app, which is great, by the way. What I would suggest is don't just read out loud every single thing that you're doing, even if it's going to take you, you're going to go 10 times slower. Read it out loud straight away. Start straight away. Don't wait and don't think, well, I'll wait until I understand it more. No, start getting your mouth working. It's a muscle. It's a muscle in the brain that links to the mouth. And if you can start early, what all of the students that I've had, that I've said to them, please start reading out loud. I've seen their Spanish go like this. It's an extreme lift in the Spanish. And that applies to beginners as well, because Spanish is phonetic. You're not going to pronounce it badly if you understand the sounds. Do the work on the sounds, and then start reading out loud everything.
That's really interesting and great advice. I didn't do that, and everybody thought about that, but um, it is important to train your tongue, your facial muscles to say the language, to get more used to hearing your voice and correcting it. That's fantastic. I'm just thinking it probably took me I was probably 2 years into learning Spanish before I could say the R right or even close to right. Um, and what's funny though is that even those born speaking Spanish in the home, their parents often have to help coach them to pronounce the R in Spanish. It's that difficult that even native born speakers have to work on that.
I haven't heard one child start speaking here that has the R sorted out.
Mhm.
It's normally when they get to around about, I don't know, 3, 4, that they start practicing enough to get it, you know? My 2 children, they took a bit longer because they're bilingual, and so it wasn't just focused on Spanish, but they all get there. They all get there. It's because it's a muscle. You've got to practice, you know, it's a muscle that you've got to build up in your tongue.
It is, and it's funny when you start learning a language, and I'm working on my third language after English, and each time I find that my face is tired, like it's a workout because you're using your tongue and your muscles in a different way, and
Absolutely.
it's amazing how much how much physicality is involved in learning a language.
Yeah, it's true. It really is. And one of the things I would say about this reading out loud, you know, it's safe because you're not talking to people, so you can make your mistakes or whatever. But everyone must understand that it's very challenging. It's not like reading in your head. When you read in your head, you go, "Whoa, I read fantastically well." When you read out loud, it slows down. And plus, you can't enjoy really what you're reading. It's not reading for enjoyment, it's reading for exercise. It's very different. So I often suggest to people have one book that you read out loud with for work, and then one book that you read in your head for pleasure.
Mhm. I like that, and I'm sure that the reading out loud still applies at the intermediate level, but I know that one's needs change as you kind of advance in your language learning journey. So, looking at those who are at the intermediate B1, B2 levels, what would you recommend as an ideal practice? Because I'm sure there are different areas of focus once you get to that level. What would you recommend in terms of spending those 30 or 40 minutes on your own each day?
Okay. So just referring back to reading out loud, for me, it's a practice that up to advanced really, really helps you to keep your Spanish pronunciation going because we don't always have the luxury of having conversations with people all of the time. And so reading out loud, I still do it now. You know, I still do it now. When I have the opportunity, I'll read a little bit. It just helps the flow. But when you get to intermediate, what I would say is number one, you've got your teacher. Let's just take that for granted. Find some exchange partners. Find some Spanish speakers who also want to learn English and do an exchange. Again, I have seen the most incredible shifts in people's language when a couple of times a week they'll have an hour, half an hour with the partner speaking in English and half an hour speaking in Spanish. It really changes the Spanish. And one of the benefits is that you think, well, I'm gonna be speaking English for half an hour. You start understanding Spanish because of the questions that they ask you, because of their confusions. It really helps you to understand the Spanish grammar as well. So it's a win-win when you do an exchange. That's what I would say is number one. Absolutely. Yeah. Beyond that, I think the key is this: do what you love, do what really fires you up, and do it every day. Much better learning a little bit every day than doing 2 hours a week in a class. The people that I see, the students that I see, and I've done it myself, when you do 2 hours in a class, you're present for the first 15 minutes, and then for 1 hour, 45 minutes, your mind's a bit like, wee. So it's much better. The brain hangs on to information when you give it little bite-sized chunks, as we mentioned earlier, but do it every day, something every day. If you leave it at the beginning, I use a metaphor. Learning language is like filling a bucket with water. You've got to fill it constantly. The problem is there's a hole in the bottom
Mhm.
and it pours out. And so you could fill it up with 2 hours on a Friday in a class. By the following Friday, the bucket's empty again. There's not much left in it. So you've got to fill it up faster than it's escaping, and also frequently. Don't leave it.
Uh, I love that analogy. That's great. Yeah, consistency is definitely key to language learning. And you do have to be mindful that, yeah, a certain amount you're going to forget because you're learning all the time and your brain can only process so much at a time and retain so much.
Yeah.
Um, let's move on to advanced learners. I'm kind of at that point right now where I'm trying to get from B2 to C1. And I think that's where you encounter um, difficulty in like understanding different accents, learning street language or slang terms, learning more esoteric language if you're focusing on a particular subject. So, what do you recommend for those who are getting into or in the advanced levels of language learning?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. When you're heading toward the C1 level, uh, the only way that you can, and you've got this luxury because I know you live in a Spanish speaking country, you've got to start spending time with native speakers. However you choose to do that, that's your, whatever you can work out. For example, I know in the UK, there are tons of Spanish people who live in the UK, and they have meetups, and they all get together, and they advertise them on Facebook. You can find them and join, and frequently get together with Spanish speakers. My number one suggestion is marry a Spanish speaker. That worked for me. That was that was my jump to C1. um, if you can't do that, then look for ways of immersing yourself. If you've got the luxury of going and spending, I don't know, a couple of months in a target country, do that. If you can find work in a Spanish speaking country, fabulous. If you can't, get as many exchanges, conversation partners as you can. But that's kind of to get to C1. I think there are some top things, top levels, like prepositions. I find that the prepositions are probably one of the last things that you really, really get a handle on. People's prepositions. I mean, our prepositions in our own language are a bit wibbly wobbly sometimes, but getting them in Spanish is a challenge. And then also, as you mentioned, idiomatic expressions, slang, and then accents. They are the challenge. And the only way you can find that is by going out and finding Spanish people. Because for every 10 Spanish speakers that you speak to, you'll find that about 4 of them speak really nicely and you understand everything. And about 6 of them, well, let's say another 4 of them, you're like this, and then 2 of them you can't understand. And
Right.
that's where you learn. That's where you start learning, when you speak to very difficult people.
All right. That's really reassuring because I encounter that right now where sometimes it's perfectly fine. I feel like, hey, I'm speaking Spanish. I understand well. And then sometimes I still feel like a beginner, like a deer in the headlights when someone speaks to me. I'm like, what the heck did they just say? I know Spanish, but I didn't quite get that. And I have to ask them to repeat. So yeah, it still happens. It is a journey. I think maybe a lot of people have this misconception, I guess, at the beginning that it's something that you master in a certain amount of time. And I'm sure you get a lot of beginners, especially if they're learning a foreign language for the first time. They'll say, "Hey, Gordon, um, so how quickly can I become fluent? When will I speak Spanish fluently?" How do you address that?
And you're right. I've had so many, and it's, as you say, it's only the only people that would ask that question are people who haven't learned a language. Anyone who's learned a language would never say, "How long will it take me to get fluent?" Because we understand that it's a lifelong journey to fluency. So what I say to them is this: I remember having a phone call. Somebody said, "I'm buying a house in Spain. I'm moving there in 6 months. How many lessons will I need to become fluent?" Okay. So I said, tell me what your idea of fluent is, because that doesn't mean anything. Fluent what? Is it, do you want to be able to order things in a restaurant? Do you want to be able to buy things in a supermarket? Do you want to be able to go to a market and buy stuff? Uh, that's one level of fluency. Do you want to have basic conversation? Another level of fluency. Or do you want to integrate into the society completely, into the culture? So what I say to them is, if you want to get by 6 to 12 months, a fairly good study, 6 to 12 months get by, you can go into a restaurant, you can go to a shop and things like that. You can buy a train ticket. If you want to have general conversation, 5 years. If you want to integrate into the society, everything else, the
Uh,
rest of your life.
right. Well, what do you think are the attributes or habits maybe of your most successful students? I know you've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, over the years, so there
Yeah.
must be certain characteristics, I guess, that stand out that one might emulate in terms of being able to learn the language, modeling on like an ideal student.
Yeah. So I've seen, it's a great question. And the answer I'm going to give you maybe isn't the one that you would like me to give you, but uh, I've seen every kind of student, all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of motivations. There's only one thing that I see that links every single student, and that is they get to a point where they're obsessed with learning Spanish and they don't know why anymore. So I've had endless conversations and I've been there. I know because I'm exactly the same. You must have a why to start. You've got to have a why.
Mhm.
Well, my son's, these are the whys I hear. My son's just married a Spanish lady. They've got children. I'm going to have to learn Spanish. I'm moving to Spain. My brother-in-law is now married to, it's always, there's some link. They've got to have to speak Spanish. Oh, I'm going to go and work there. And that's always the why. That's the start, but that's not really what gets them going. That starts them, then the start. And then I've had just endless students say to me, Gordon, I just don't know why. I'm just so obsessed with Spanish and I've got to learn it. So I think that obsession, it comes because Spanish is such a beautiful language, and I've learned other languages and I've done it very badly. And I wasn't at the right place in my life. I was at the right place, but there's something about Spanish that is just truly beautiful. It's a beautiful language, and it's so expressive. And coming from an English background, where we're quite sort of subsumed, we're quite sort of we play it down. Let's not get carried away. Whereas Spanish people are really expressive, and I think it's a way that you can kind of change your personality. So I think to be obsessed, you've got to be curious. So
Mm.
curiosity is probably the top quality that you can have. Be curious about everything, want to know everything, want to find out everything, want to understand why they've used the subjunctive there, want to know why they keep changing the preposition with that verb. This is what you've got to get like.
Mhm. Interesting. I want to kind of explore that idea of being obsessed. That because motivation is key, especially once you get to that really long plateau of the intermediate level. Um, I'm wondering, like, what causes that motivation, that obsession? Is it? Do you think it's that people see that different side of themselves? You mentioned how you feel like you have a different personality. Do you think something lights up that tells someone, "Hey, what I like hearing this. I like saying this. This is something that's opening up maybe a different part of my brain, my personality, whatever." Do you think that there's that kind of change happening?
Absolutely, it does. You can feel it when you were speaking in Spanish, and if you're with Spanish speakers, you just feel that you're a different person. It's proven actually that in the studies that different parts of your brain light up and your personality changes. And I've had people comment to me when I'm talking to them in English, and I might answer the call and speak in Spanish, and they go, "Wow, your personality changed completely when you were speaking in Spanish."
Right.
Um, so there's that, and that obsession. But I think as well what happens, and this is what I see, when I see the spark in a student's eye, it's when they say to me, well, I went out and the neighbor came out. They've got a house in Spain. The neighbor came out and I had a beautiful chat with them for 10 minutes. And everything, I just spoke so well. And it's like the get a, when you get a win, and people don't often get wins in their life, but you get a win and you have this beautiful conversation. I remember the story of a man who wrote the book Driving Over Lemons. I don't know if you know that book. It's about a man who moved to Spain, uh, and uh, and he talks about these moments of these wonderful moments where you just have this conversation and everything flows. And I think it's those wins that you want more of. Oh, we've got
Mhm.
plenty losses as well. I mean, we want less of them. But when you get those wins and you think, "Wow, I can actually do this," I think it pushes you on.
Mhm. You're absolutely right. I love moments like that. I think it's important to discover those along the way, to celebrate those as you make progress.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing I wanted to cover before I wrap up is I'm curious as to what changes you and Cynthia have made over the years, as I imagine that Lightspeed is different today than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. So I'd love to hear maybe just first of all, like what your overall approach is, and then how maybe that approach or components of your teaching have evolved over the years.
Great question. And I haven't thought about this, but now that you've asked it, I can see what's happened. So the first thing I would say is the name of our business is called LightSpeed Spanish. Obviously, you choose the name according to what you want to suggest to your clients, your students, or whatever. And at the time when I first started speaking Spanish, I had the luxury of having 2 years immersion. So I leapfrogged very much so forward. I was fluent in Spanish after 2 years, but I was fluently, as I say, I was fluently crap. I was fluent, but blinking heck, I'm not sure what I was saying, but it was fluent. And I thought that I could share with people systems that would get them to be fluent very, very quickly. Hence the name. Yeah. So at the beginning, what we would do is, and yeah, there are lots and lots of little they're not shortcuts, they're just things that can speed up your learning a little bit. You can learn a lot of vocab if you want, tons of vocab, just little hooks that I would invent so that people could learn. And it served us really well. Over time, what I've seen is that they're great, but they won't take you to fluency. And so I've actually become, and sometimes I get criticized for it. Would you believe it's strange, but I've become very traditional in how I believe we should learn language, and I believe that grammar is a fundamental part of learning language. It's the structure, it's the skeleton of language, and if you avoid it, which many people will tell you, you don't need it. Many people, and I think they're doing people a great disservice because then you get further down the line and you've developed all these bad habits because you haven't had the grammar structure. So I'm kind of where Lightspeed Spanish is now is, hey, let's have fun. Our number one has always been let's laugh while we learn. Let's have fun. Because what I've discovered is that when the part of our brain is lit up when we think something's funny, we remember it much more than when something's not funny.
Mhm.
You know? So have fun, but let's do the work. Let's not skimp. Our book on the subjunctive. When I started learning Spanish, I did my certificates in the UK, and my teachers didn't teach me the subjunctive. And I was doing A level, which is 18 plus. Obviously, I was a mature student, and then I was doing the university, and they weren't talking about the subjunctive. And I was thinking, why is that? Why is that? What we say now is, as a beginner, you should be starting to understand the subjunctive, at least as a basic, so that when you say, espero que, you say tengas and not tienes. Espero que
Mhm.
tengas un buen día. That's a beginner sentence, but it's got subjunctive in. And so it's kind of like where we are now is get the foundation right first. Get it right first time. Don't get 5 years down the line and discover you've been saying things wrongly. So it's kind of where we are now. We still have fun. We've got so much content, I mean, we've got 15 years of content just uploaded to YouTube and on our website. But our focus is let's let's learn how let's learn the tenses, let's learn how to conjugate them, let's learn how to use them, when you should use them as well. So it's kind of like I think I'm more traditional now than I was when I began.
That's interesting. Maybe in a future conversation, we can dive into grammar. That really interests me. It is a big challenge for language learners, and it often is not fun. So any way that might make it fun is certainly interesting. So yeah, let's maybe look at that for a future conversation.
I'd
I
love
think
to.
we're running short on time right now, but before we go, I of course want listeners to know where they can find you, where they can learn more about Lightspeed, and also maybe just a quick overview of what you do offer.
Okay, so our website is lightspeedspanish.co.uk. We also have a channel on YouTube called Lightspeed Spanish, so you can find us if you just type Lightspeed Spanish into Google. You'll find us everywhere. We're all over the place. What we offer on our website are for beginners, intermediate, and advanced. We offer lots and lots of free content, maybe more than 300 free videocasts and podcasts. But at the same time, what we offer is for the, I would say, intermediate and above, we offer our VIP zone, and that's where you join us as a member, and you get 2 lessons a week, and then access to 10 years of lessons, like 1,000 lessons. So really, it's anything that you would need to learn. We've covered it, and
You
maybe twice.
I know your content library is really impressive. It's amazing how much you've done and how much you still produce every week. I have a hard time keeping up.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Rick, I love being able to offer people the opportunity of having the joy that I've had from learning Spanish. It's very important to share that, spread the joy. And
Well,
I
that
know how
certainly comes
beautiful it is.
across. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you again. I've really appreciated your content and, of course, your time today. And I'll put all these links in the description below. So thank you again. It's been great chatting with you, Gordon.
Thank you, Rick. It's been a pleasure, and I'll be looking forward to speaking with you the next time.
Okay, likewise. Cheers.
All right.